So good afternoon, everybody. We're glad you're here. We thought this was an important conversation about admissions marketing, and we wanted to wait a little bit after the May 1st deadline. And judging by the RSVPs that we received, many of you also think this is an important topic. So hello to everyone joining us live on Zoom. Shout out to my colleague, Katie, for helping us stream this simultaneously on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And for those of you watching this on demand in the future, this is being recorded on May 11th, 2021. And I mention that because the information in this presentation and the opinions of our panelists may change over time, and certainly over the last year change rapidly. So with that said, let's meet our panel. And what we wanted to do with this presentation was really share a number of perspectives, not just the agency perspective, having worked with a number of clients and different types of clients, but really wanted to bring in the client side, as it were, for a really deeper dive and case study that you'll hear about. So joining me on the panel is Sean Fitzpatrick, Marketing Director from the University of New England, located in Maine, where the weather changes as rapidly as the market conditions. Seated immediately to his left, my colleague, Dr. Chris Fasano, a strategist at iterate and expert in neuroscience, in particular decision-making in digital and advertising contexts. Together, this panel, including myself, really have decades of experience in higher education marketing, enrollment marketing, admissions support. And we've either worked with or for dozens of schools, really as diverse as the folks that we saw register for this event. We've worked with 2-year schools, 4-year schools, public, private, faith-based, with our friends to Shawns South at Gordon College, military at the Citadel, really a number of different perspectives. And most of us are old enough also to have seen changes through many of the downturns that, similar to what we're experiencing here, though this past year was particularly unique and really seems to defy convention. Chris, if you could hop over to the next slide, or a couple slides, I think. Right there. So I think a lot of you will recognize this, the Clearinghouse report, published and updated pretty much quarterly. And what you're looking at here is the chart showing admission rates for the current year. So this is fall 2020 enrollment. And really interesting, and to set the stage for our conversation, as I mentioned, this past year really seems to defy convention compared to any of the other economic downturns. I started my career in '92 during a recession, saw the dot-com bubble burst, 9/11, mortgage crisis, and there were things that were very common to all of those circumstances. But this past year, and as you can see on this chart, really interesting, the 4-year schools in those first 2 columns remain unchanged in terms of their enrollment trends for this academic year. For-profit, and if you can see the cursor there, that big blue tick mark moving up, this is the last 5 years for for-profit enrollment, something that had been very struggling significantly from some brand issues, legislative issues, but really, those are the types of schools in many cases invented or certainly perfected distance learning, and were arguably very well positioned to succeed during the last year. But really, most notably, look at the last column all the way to the right, enrollment trends for public 2-year schools. Now, most economic downturns will see community colleges doing quite well with enrollment. And again, this is where this past year has been particularly remarkable. Certainly, during this enrollment cycle for fall 2020, the pandemic came on very, very fast. And there's a lot of speculation that unemployment benefits, certainly may have something to do with the market's reaction to enrollment. And a lot of that will level set. And certainly that's frankly what many of us are sweating it out, waiting to see if we made our class after the May 1st deposit deadline, or if we're going to continue to work harder again this summer, to keep numbers up for fall 21 enrollment. So as I said before, this past year has really defied convention. There were significant, unique changes to consumer behavior, to the marketplace, and therefore our approach to admissions marketing. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris and Sean now to share their insights and some pretty in-depth case studies to look at how we navigated this and sharing some of our knowledge and best practices. So Chris, let's begin with guiding principles.
All right, great. Thanks, Paul. And thanks everyone for joining us today. this is a really exciting topic for me. It's in an agency where we deal in different industries. Higher ed is one that is very fun and neurologically, psychologically stimulating for me, because you're dealing with a demographic, that out there on social media. You're competing for attention, and we're going to talk about that. So it presents interesting challenges. That what we're going to do today is show you some guiding principles that we think address these challenges in the marketing, and what are the ideas that are really behind good higher ed marketing. And so I'm going to talk through some of these guiding principles for the first part. And then Sean will come into the next part and talk about some real life, case studies and examples from UNE. And then we're going to close just talking about what the overit process is in, implementing these guiding principles in marketing, and how we work with a higher ed institution and making sure these guiding principles are up front and center. So we wanted to start with this guiding principle of what's your why. And we put here the golden circle as illustrated by Simon Sinek. This very, very famous, what's your why in this circle? Very simplistic idea, but very, very important. Probably one of the most important things you can do and illustrate in marketing, in particular for a higher ed. And so what does this illustrate here? Well, the main sort of purpose of this is to say that people don't really buy what you do. They buy why you do it. And I think this matters more nowadays, in particular with a younger demographic who are looking to be a part of something, right? A lot of businesses, especially colleges and higher ed, they have a very similar goal, right? They want to increase enrollment, right? But that's a result, right? A lot of organizations know what they do, how they do it, not many know really why they do it. And that really matters. So if I'm out there and I have a lot of options and everybody's saying, hey, we're going to get you in here. We're going to educate you. We're going to get you a job. Well, I would hear that value proposition across the board, but I really want to know why. What is your why? What am I drawn to emotionally? What am I going to identify with? So do you know what your why is? And the classic example that Simon uses is an apple, right? Apple. If you're going outside in, right, from what to the middle, you would say, we make great computers. They're very simple and they're beautiful. Do you want to buy one? And that's okay, but that's really doesn't drive me to want to buy a computer, right? But if you go from the inside out, they say, everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in doing it differently. We do it. How do we do it? We make beautiful computers that are simple, blah, blah, blah. Do you want to buy it? If you lead with the why, it's a stronger connection. And this golden circle isn't really just an opinion. In fact, it has root in neuroscience. And it's actually structurally very similar to what I'm showing here. And I have to do a gratuitous neuroscience plug always in these presentations. I think this just fits so well. So what you're looking at here is a cross-section of the human brain. And in the middle in that circle is our middle part of the brain, our limbic centers. It's the reason, it's the why. It's very primitive and primal. It's where our emotions and our reward centers are. It drives decision-making. And interestingly enough, the middle of our brain has no ability to produce language. The only thing it does is produce emotion and drive our decisions. And then as humans on the outer ring, that's our what? That is our evolved behaviors, our rational thought. So decisions aren't made in the outside of the brain. They're rationalized here. So we have a primal, I want this. And then our outside of our brain will sort of, okay, well, why do you want that? And sort of do that. And it fits perfectly with the golden circle. And so if you can speak to someone's why and elicit a response in the center of their brain, they are going to connect to that much more than they are if you connect with the outside of the brain. And so I think that is really the driving force here in the guiding principle. What is your why? And if you can convey that and you can strike up the middle of that person's brain, they will remember you when they're sitting down and looking at different brands. So that's the first guiding principle. The second one is doing your job, knowing your role, right? And this is really important in any sort of organization, in a leadership position, in any sort of department, right? Everybody has an individual role. And frequently what you don't want to happen is you don't want, there's good to have layers of redundancy, but it's really important to know that you're maximizing and empowering everybody in their role. This is a classic sports sort of X and O's and football diagram. The wide receiver on the right here, his job is to run a good route and catch the ball, right? He's not really concerned so much about blocking in the middle. And you have to do the best at what you do in your job. And, you can crosstalk. You really want to identify what is your role. And it's really important when you're talking about relationships, both in-house in marketing and also your relationship with a vendor, with an agency like Overit. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but you want to identify what are the strengths of that in-house team, who is doing what are they empowered to do, and how is that vendor assisting that? How are they helping you get to where you have to go, right? What is the best way to push everything together? The best way to do that is making sure that everybody's doing their job and knowing that and being empowered to do their job and continue to push forward. And we'll talk about that later in the process of how we do that. This is an interesting, concept that is the most relevant. The next two really, really relevant in the higher ed world, where you're dealing with a younger demographic that skews younger, and we call it hit velocity. The amount of ads and the amount of communications that people are seeing nowadays out and about is incredible, right? There is a share of voice that we're constantly competing with. Over 5,800 ads per quarter, 1,900 ads per month, 63 ads per day. There is a lot of stuff coming at us. And in order to really resonate, to get into that middle brain and peak that emotion, you have to be able to compete with that velocity. You have to be able to compete with that share of voice. It's really, really important. Why is that? Well, because nearly 14% of internet users remembered the last ad they saw. If I ask everybody in this panel or who's attending, what's the last 2 ads that you saw on social media? Would you remember that? I'm trying to think right now. And I don't really remember what the last ad I saw was. Only 8% recall the company of the product promoted, and just about 3% thought the ad was relevant, right? So you have to be able to maintain a rigorous pace of communication and maintain that hit velocity if you really want to make an impact. And that has to be one of the guiding principles when we get into the marketing plan and discussions for higher ed. Along those lines, so you want to maintain that share of voice and that rigorous pace, but you have to do it where the students are, right? Because of this, we have this term attention economics. We are fighting for attention for these younger people, for everyone nowadays out on the world of digital. All this stuff is flying at them. And so we're competing on that. And this is just an example here, just illustrating all of the different places that people are seeing advertisements, right? Broadcast, they're online, they're on digital, they're books and live streams and over the top, and everything is coming at them in different ways. And so we have to make sure that you're right message, right time, competing, getting that hit velocity up, and being where your students are to really, really make sure you're reinforcing that brand, pushing your why, and resonating middle brain to make sure they can remember you in the right place at the right time. And then when you have all of that, and you've gotten your why, you think you really understand what the why is, you have your plan, you're out there, you're competing with share of voice, you got a good hit velocity, you're where they are. It just doesn't stop there. You have to constantly iterate to improve and continue to peak middle brain and recall. And you have to keep doing that, illustrated by these circles here and that arrow driving forward. The only way that arrow is going to continue to drive forward is if you're continuing to iterate, make improvements, optimize, and doing that in conjunction with both the in-house marketing team and the agency once you understand and empower each other to know who's doing what. So these really are the guiding principles that we feel lead to success in higher ed marketing. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Sean. Sean's going to talk about his experience at UNE, show some examples of this, and how a little bit about also how Overit and UNE work together. So Sean, I am going to turn it over to the blue to you.
Thanks, Chris.
No
and
problem.
Thanks to Overit for inviting me today. We were having a meeting talking about our current campaigns. I was with a couple of team members and we were talking about things are going well. And they said, hey, you should come on board for a webinar with us. And we've been talking with Paul and Chris about it. So it's great to be here today. I'm glad we could connect. And Paul and Chris asked me to tell some stories that bring the work to life. We've been working together since 2015 when I started at UNE and my team and I built the brand marketing program to complement the existing admissions marketing and been growing ever since. So I'm going to get into my stories now. So first, just to talk about knowing one's role, this is a chart between admissions and brand marketing at UNE. And I'm not going to get into it, but how we manage the funnel. This is dividing up different activities along, in this specific place, the undergrad funnel. When I came on board, we said it's really important that we not step on each other's toes and that we complement. So let's communicate about what we're all doing all the way along the funnel. And moving on from there to the next slide, please, Chris. So when admissions and brand marketing, when we look at what do we really need to have in-house, we have some technical expertise. And I should say, you know, here in the Office of Marketing and Communications, I'm lucky we've got talented designers and developers, storytellers, and at admissions similarly as well. But we say, well, what do we position to do the best? And that's the stuff that's closest to the institution. So we own everything. We basically live UNE, right? We know the institution inside and out. We know the stakeholders and how to move things through. We manage the core technology, the website on my side, the CRM on admissions side, and some other technology. We do that storytelling because we can reach the students, and we maintain a rigor of engagement. So we know we can do that, and we do more whenever we can. So when do we pull in vendors? It says on the next slide. And we basically have this as a litmus. When we're in a tight spot and we're realizing that we could leverage a vendor to expand our capacity, when we need to do more or do it faster, to add technical skill sets, when we just need to do something highly technical that might not be well managed within our in-house team, where we have a good number of specialists. And then additionally, when we want to bring in an outside view, we just say, hey, we need a fresh perspective. Can you help us with this? So we'll just have these 3 rules to say, maybe we should bring somebody in for capacity, skills, or just a fresh view. So that's knowing one's roles. And the team here does a great job of getting out there and knowing the students. This is speaking about the Simon Sinek Golden Circle. So brand beyond benefits. So if you could go to the next slide, Chris. So this is the recent brand campaign, What's Your Part for UNE, that we developed with the in-house team, primarily in consultation with vendors, including Over It. But this was a space where we said, listen, we live here, we live this, we know these students, and we looked into the DNA of the university's mission, and we did some research into what students wanted to hear. And, you know, anybody who's attending, who's in higher ed, knows students are concerned not only about their own future, but about the state of the world. And we decided to speak overtly to that. We have a lot of health professions, health sciences programs, and biological sciences, people who want to go in the world and have a profession where they make a difference. And so we just wanted to speak directly to that, say, hey, what's your part? UNE will help you find it and become your part. And then you see the little subhead, this world needs all of us, was a part where we said, we just want to put it out there that everything isn't perfect right now. We feel any anxiety you have, and we want to work with you to bring the solutions that you want to bring. So
of course, Sean, you have a lobster bait innovator in here from Maine, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. We've got a great marine science program, and when we meet somebody who's from a lobstering family in Maine, we say, please, will you be in the
That's
ad?
Great.
And she's great. But just to speak on that, we do speak to the benefits at UNE, and research shows students love the career outcomes here. We have very strong career outcomes. We have rankings. We're on the coast of Maine. We have an aerial picture that shows those benefits. We have a great global campus in Morocco. And we get to that stuff. We've got it covered. But the first step is we're connecting with students about them. And that speaks to what Chris was saying about starting with why. So we developed that in late 2019, early 2020. We took a huge pause because COVID hit, and we just decided to go quiet. And then we worked to meet the market. So the next shows, what happened when we went into the campaign. We historically had gone dark in the summer because the cycle was done. But the cycle was so chaotic, we actually decided to go into market for May 1st last year and push all the way through the summer. And we worked really hard internally and with Overit to atomize all of the content, tell all of these student stories, animate into different HTML5 ads, create different videos that are pushed through YouTube and other video advertising networks, and distribute them. So that's, we found the stories, we got some good photos. Overit made it possible for us to get all of these many tiny little atomized pieces out to the right people.
Hey, Sean, just for us to go on this a little bit, do you find that the students are willing to do this when you guys reach out to them, that they want to be a part of these campaigns and do these videos and stuff? Because I know like user generated content, especially in higher ed, is big, is important. So
absolutely, yeah. It's it requires a conversation. Honestly, Chris, some students are need more of a conversation, and where we've landed in a department, especially in this era, with all of the Black Lives Matter realizations our society's been having, where we want to reflect the diversity of our community, you need to have a full conversation with each student and commit to them that you're going to show their whole person. So we've really been working hard to, do the work at UNE to make sure our diversity programming is solid so we can express that to the diverse students in our community as we ask them to participate. And we say, and we'll say whatever you want to say. We'll tell your story, not just our story. And that makes it fun. So then moving into that velocity on social, all of these Instagram and Facebook ads. Yes, we still do Facebook ads. Parents are a big part of this process as well. And a surprising number of students still have a utility Facebook account, but mostly on Insta with stories. And you see, we took all of these many student stories and put them out on social, and Overit helped us target to our geo lists and to our bought lists and to our remarketing lists and all of that stuff. Very complex setup. On to the next. And so we hit frequency across those many channels. All roads lead to Rome, to the website. And Overit helped us set up GA and other tracking software on the website so we could understand, as people were coming to the site, where were they coming from and what were the specific actions that people were taking when they came from each channel. And Chris will talk more about Overit's process for that in a bit. And then, of course, continuous improvement. So we got out into market. It was a strange year, as everyone knows, and we were solid for the fall. It wasn't the end of the world, but even so, everybody was taking a deep breath and singing Kumbaya and saying we're going to make it through together. And of course, there was a lot of work to do just to reassure our existing student community about the back to campus plan. But then when we came back in the fall, we looked at how we're going to adjust to the COVID cycle for students for the incoming fall of 21 class. And of course, virtual events were huge. And you see the picture, that aerial picture of the campus, you can imagine when we have our fall open house events, they really please students. Students come to meet a great community. They see that's our Biddeford campus. I'm on the Portland campus right now, but they fall in love with the location. So we needed to emulate that with virtual events that admissions developed and sponsored, and we broadcast awareness through digital and social. And then the early action cycle changed up a lot. We took the brand visuals of the What's Your Part campaign and put tactical marketing and put a more robust investment into our early action campaigns this year, just because the cycle was so unpredictable. So those were some adjustments on the undergrad side. And on the next slide, Chris, then it shows some adjustments we made on the program level side for our graduate programs. And so, a lot of times, people can focus on undergrad because it's this big chunky effort. And we also market at a program level for our grad program. So on the left is a relatively new, this is the third cohort we're creating for this Ocean Food Systems PSM, and we needed to keep students coming in, and Overit helped us with the lead gen and targeting our remarketing and purchase list audiences and promoting the webinars. And I'm happy to say that class is in and it's above goal and above last year. So that's great. And on the right is OT. all of those programs. You can see there's a student shot selfie video on the right, and another one in the middle where there's a student in the OT lab. And that's just where I can go out and ask a student, you know, I can call them and say, send me a video and I'll make an ad out of it, or I'll meet you at the lab. But it's there to basically put it on the robust technology on the back end to make sure it's getting to people the way we want it to.
You know, I think that those are so important to mix in, because if you just look at the collage really on the right in the OT campaign, and you see that image of that young student there, and there's that blue sort of like text box, that's very, you know, young looking, right? That looks like she created that. And that, again, that matters a lot, because you're where they are, and you're speaking to them in the way that they speak. And I think that it's nice to have these really, you know, a mixture of that, where you have real user-generated content straight from the student, and then you also have this more professional look. I think it really does help compete with that attention economics, and let them see that, oh, I can relate to her, and that looks like something I would do. So
absolutely, really, Chris. And it's kind of fortunate because it helps you hit the velocity you spoke to when you say, well, we're going to make this feel student shot and student presented. It has that authentic student to student connection. It's also pretty easy, right? As long as you have maintained those relationships with students. So looking ahead for Uni, you know, where we are after this crazy year, and hopefully the pandemic is going to be winding down in the next 6 months, knock on particle board here, but we're really producing more work by atomizing that creative and more engagements with individual students than ever before. And we've maintained ground through the pandemic. You know, I have to say, you know, we're not through it yet, but we're feeling confident and keeping the faith. Meanwhile, we're gathering data on how all of this extra work is doing, and we're deciding to, for better or for worse, adopt many of these things we've done for COVID as long-term practices, just as far as the pacing and the virtual events and the program level marketing. So those are my stories, and Chris, I'll hand the mic to you to bring us home.
All right, great. So
quick question. One of the attendees had asked what CRM you use.
Liaison.
Okay, thanks. If you want to take a look at the question in the chat, maybe you can sidebar because they're considering making a change, and perhaps you have experience with that. So
okay, cool. Yep, sure. And happy to follow up afterwards as needed too. Thanks.
All right, so for the last, I'd say probably 10 minutes or less, I'm just going to walk you through what the overt process is and how we go through implementing our guiding principles and work with you, like we work with Sean and UNE, on seeing them through, getting them out into market. And then, you know, what is the process in CRMs? How do you decide what that looks like? And so we're going to talk about that a little bit now. So the first thing, speaking to that guiding principle of do your job and know your role, is to really understand the role and to assist and empower. It's really important to empower the team. And this is done, you know, I should say the process here that I'm laying out is listed in a logical order, but it doesn't necessarily, we don't do it one and then the next. You know, a lot of these things are going concurrently. But really the first thing is to understand is what are the roles of the team? What does this sort of Venn diagram look like, right? So you could have a fairly 50-50 role where university team, the in-house team, is doing a defined 50%, and then the vendor over it, that we come in and we're doing a defined 50%. And there is some overlap there on strategy and some other things. You know, or you can have a situation where these other Venn diagrams to the right are, you know, the university, it's very university team heavy, and over it's just there to assist in the ways that are necessary and needed. Or it's the opposite, that over it is doing the majority and helping a smaller bootstrap team that's trying to get up and going, and we're really trying to help them grow. Everything is flexible and we can adopt to that, but it's important that we understand what the roles are. Who do we go to for this? Who do we go to for that? And we get that down. The same goes for over it on our side, for Sean, or for teams that we're working with. Who do they come to on over its team to get what they need? You know, at a minimum on the university side, it's important that, you know, they're going to find the stories and coordinate with those internal players, like those students. You know, they're there with the students. So it's important that they have that connection and help facilitate a process to get that content. And then over it is there to complement whatever we can. If it's more long form videos and content that's needed, we can help with that. The data analysis, the strategy, whatever it is, all comes out of this sort of initial meetings to understand roles. So we know what roles we're going to play, how to empower the team, and that we can continue to move forward in the process. And again, that can look very different and can be very flexible. This just is the next step, really. And I just took the video it would just be, this is actually Paul Fahey here talking to a bunch of young people here in a room at Over It, where we do our focus groups. We have the wall, the transparent wall where you can watch reactions and everything like that. And this is just one of our fact finding mechanisms to understand your why: surveys, talking to staff, talking to students, interviewing them. And all of that is to understand what the why is, and building out a brand board with attributes and positioning so we can really be out there and speaking to your why. This is the most critical part, as we mentioned, to really speak to that limbic inner brain so that the recall will be strong. We can't just do that just by reading about it. We really have to dig. And our brand team, does a really excellent job of finding your why through many different mechanisms. And that's really a critical part of the process. So everything sort of will be based off of the why, and we can do a better job of connecting and competing with the attention economics and that hit velocity that's out there. So we're getting the why, understanding how we're going to portray and display and put that why out there to the world. And the next part is really to understand the marketing technology that your team is implementing. Someone just asked about a CRM. Well, that is a major piece here that really matters. And this is just a diagram that we help put together for one of our clients that we work with, and just looking at how what is the step along the way? I think, Sean, we were talking about a path, and this job helps us sort of understand if someone's walking down a path. You have your little stones there. We want to make sure that there's not one missing or one too high or low that's going to make them trip on the path towards admissions, right? We want to make it as smooth as possible. Nowadays, even more so, when you get that lead in, you want to make sure you're getting the most out of that lead, and you're going to squeeze it all the way down the funnel and getting them to that point of enroll. And so what does that look like? What is the technology that you're using? How are you getting your attribution? How are we knowing what channels of our marketing will be successful? How are we nurturing them? What happens with admissions? How does it get there, right? And then once they do commit, are we continuing to nurture them? So we call this process sales enablement, right? And sale being in the end an enrollment. And so we take a deep dive and an audit here to make sure the path is smooth. And if it's not, we try to figure out a way that we can smoothen the path out. So we're making the best out of every lead that we're going to get, because we're going to throw all of that information out there with the goal of getting them in the funnel. And once they're in, we may want to make sure we don't lose them once they get in. So this is another critical component of the process, helps us really understand how we're going to attribute, capture, and nurture. When we have the why now, right, we know the team, we've sort of smoothened out the path. We feel comfortable how we're going to capture the data. So the next part is we want to deliver that data, right? So what we're going to do next is we're going to come up with a media strategy, and we're going to take into account all of the different intents, right? Because in consumer choice, in our brains, there's different ways. There's active intent, there's passive intent. Active intent is, I'm looking outside, I need a new lawnmower. My lawnmower is broken. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to say, I need a new lawnmower. I'm looking for a lawnmower, or, I want to take courses, or I want to go to college. Actively looking. We're going to be out there on the search mediums. Passive is, I'm out there and I happen to see an ad for a lawnmower, and I might not be thinking about it, but if you give me a good deal or show me a good picture, maybe I'll buy it, right? So passive intent, students and kids are out there, they're on these mediums and they're in the market for college, but they might not be looking at yours until they get a beautiful ad about your school and what you offer and your why. Okay. Those are your social media platforms, mainly subconsciously looking. And then there's a middle ground that has both active and passive. And so we're going to make sure we cover them all. We're going to put them in a very detailed Gantt chart media strategy plan with flight dates and budgets, so that all of our teams, internal and vendor, are on the same exact page. We know what's running, where it's running, what the target is, all of this stuff. So we're on the same page and we know exactly what's happening as the year progresses. Really important. And this is sort of the go-to-market piece now. We have your why, we have everything, we have the strategy, and now it's going to get out there. And this is just a sort of a collage of content through one of our clients that we work with, Hudson Valley Community College, just illustrating some creative and how we change things up, put things out, and get things in different mediums so we can start to get out there, put the why out there, let people respond and see what that response is when it comes back. Take that data and then take the data, use it, optimize it, which is the next part of the process, so that we can continue moving forward. This is just sort of one of these splashboards showing you how we put some creative to life and how we would get that out, what sort of content we would use to engage. And so now, we have the why, we have the content, we know the team, we have the funnel built. And so now we got it out in the world. The beauty of digital is that it's real-time data. I mean, as someone who's a scientist and lives by data, the beauty of digital marketing is that you get so much data back and you get it back very quickly. The key is it's not so much how much data, it's what you do with the data you have. This is always something I used to tell my grad students, like, you're going to show me all this data. That's great. You got to tell me what it means. Otherwise, we just have a whole bunch of stuff, right? So this is just one of the things that we part of the process that we do to make sure everything matters, right? So we're going to identify your journey and we build what we call antenna. Now, I call it antenna. Some people hate that I call it antenna. I personally like the word antenna. And this is really what it means. So, when we work with Sean or we work with our other clients, we're going to have an ad or a campaign running. Right. And that's going to drive, Sean, all signs, everything leads back to Rome, right? We're driving to your website. And this is just showing people come in on a starting page and some people leave, but a lot of them keep going and they go in and they go to other places. And that matters. So let's say we run an ad on Snapchat or we run an ad on Instagram and we're driving them to this page here. Well, we've seen that they tend to go to these other places too. So we've set up these little antenna. We call them antenna or data traps. Every time they hit this page, it logs that count. 1, 1, 1, 1. So what we then do is we will then start to tally up these actions, and we do it by campaign and we do it by medium. So we can say, okay, well, on this campaign on Facebook, these were the actions that they took. On Google search, these were the actions that they took. And we always have a primary action, right? So there's a primary action. We want someone to fill out a form, let's say. That's the primary action. That's our goal. But we know all people, at least on the first visit, a lot of people don't fill out a form. But it doesn't mean they didn't go in and click on the students page and then went to look at the majors in this program and then they went to here. That has value. So we're going to make sure that none of that information is lost. And we're going to set up our little data traps and antennas, and we're going to keep signaling back so we can do a better readout, right? We want to create enough of these. We don't want to go crazy, right? We don't want to have, 100 different antenna, because then we're going to, you have to be able to make sense of the data, right? So we're going to pick them strategically, and then we're going to do a sort of action connection, right? We're going to say, okay, well, we're going to signal these actions. And then what we want to do is we want to relate them back to the funnel stage, right? And so here we have, this is from UNE's page here. We have different actions like a request info button. Well, that correlates to the green of the inquire, phase here of the funnel. And the apply button, that's a little more down funnel. And then we have our web visit and engage actions, right? You can see them in blue. Someone goes here and what makes it special? Oh, I want to read about that. Now that's not a very low funnel action, but that is a more of an engagement, higher funnel action. It all matters, right? Just because they didn't click apply doesn't mean that that doesn't have value. Remember, you're paying for that click. So if you're going to pay for something, you want to get value from that click, right? And this is how we do it. So we're going to say, all right, now we have all these actions. This was the ad we ran. We ran it on search. And here were the results that we got from this campaign and this medium. We had a 30% bounce. We had a 35% blue, right, which is our web visit and engage. We had some lower down funnel actions, and then we had 5% apply. So this tells us that this might be skewed towards a little bit more of someone that's still looking around, right? People got there, they leave, or they want to explore more. So a more high funnel campaign, a more high funnel medium, and we then know, okay, we're driving traffic. They're not ready yet. Okay. They visited admissions, 15%. Maybe they're interested. So let's retarget them. Let's nurture them and see if we can bring them down funnel. And if we want to add more people to top funnel, this seems like a good campaign and or medium to do so. And that's really how the behavior and those antenna signal the data to tell us what's really important. So we add up all these actions and we start to do the readout. And that allows us to keep iterating, to keep doing it over to optimize. We go to the team, report back to Sean and his team or our clients and his team, say, hey, we only got 5% apply, but blah, 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 blah. We have all this other interesting data, right? So it's really important to make sure you're capturing all of that as part of the process. And that's part of the setup process.
Yep. And Chris, just to say, looking back at the slide with the web page, that's actually a PPC campaign, a paid search campaign that's happening now. And, the Overit team has really set up a very complex set of trackable events for us to watch, because we're driving traffic, not to a squeeze page with just one conversion. Right. We're sending them to explore and maybe convert, because, after years of doing a good amount of pure lead gen to good effect, we've seen that these are very complex long-term purchases. And so we want to encourage people to explore even while we give them that hard conversion opportunity. So that back-end setup helps us do that with confidence.
And we could just, you could just stop at, okay, we did this campaign, we had a 5% CTR and 2% applied. And that could be all you get. But we know it's much more complex than that. And we know that there's a lot more happening behind those numbers. And so we want to make sure we can capture all of those details, because they matter. And it matters on the approach on how we feed and sort of nurture that longer tail sale, if you will. And then all of this information we can put it into a dashboard. We can get it out. We have all this information in visualization graphs. We have messaging that we test on a routine basis. So we're constantly iterating and changing and to improve. And it's really this information and it's this sort of setup. And it all comes one more back. It all comes from the initial sort of tracking conversion setup. If you have this setup, you're able to then make your connections. You're able to quantify. You're able to visualize. And if you're able to do all that, you're able to improve. And that's really the game. And that's really the final piece of the process. And so, I hope that sort of spoke to how we at Overit approach. We implement these guiding principles. And with the examples that Sean showed from his work at UNE and just a little bit from what we do with some other clients, I hope you got a good sense of what we do at Overit as an agency to help higher ed marketing. And so moving forward, don't get discouraged by these crazy times. You got to make sure you find your why, really let it resonate. We can help. You can help you. We always say we can help you get over it. There's just some email addresses here. You guys can reach out to Overit if we want any more detailed questions or information about what we spoke about today. Thank you guys for your attention. And I believe we have plenty of time for questions if anyone has any questions. And Paul, I don't know if there have been some coming in. I haven't been looking to my left. So I will stop there. Thank you, everybody.
No, thanks, Chris. I think we're caught up on questions from the live Zoom audience. There's a couple that came in on social media that I think are probably better on a one-to-one follow-up. So we'll forward those to you guys for an offline reply. So last call to anybody here live on Zoom, if there's any other questions for the panel. Otherwise, we booked this for an hour and happy to give you the gift of free time for that last 15 minutes or so. Well, Chris, Sean, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing those insights, best practices. I hope this was useful to our audience. Thank you again for joining us. And again, this will be available to watch on demand. If you'd like copies of the slides or any of the other information, happy to share those, and Katie will help us connect with you offline. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys. Have a great day.